everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Pod Stallions, the official podcast of PodStallions.com. I am your host, Brian, and with me, as always, way over there is Jason Lindsay.
Hello, everybody.
And we've got a new episode, and yesterday was his birthday, and our subject matter is Jack King Kirby. But before we get to that...
All hail the king.
All hail the king. Before we get to that, you wanted to make an announcement, Jason.
Yes, I wanted to make an announcement. Everybody, hope you're all sitting down. If you're not, I'll wait. Okay, everyone's sitting down? All right. We just wanted to say that we've gotten some comments here and there about the disparity between Brian's voice and mine with the audio. I'm doing this through a headset, which I don't think comes through all that clearly. We had some problems with Skype, and if anybody wants to come over, you come over and check out my laptop to see if we can get it to work. But we've had problems getting it to work on my end. I'm sure it's my fault. So I just want to apologize.
I also hate Skype.
For the quality of some of the recordings. Hopefully, the juice of what we're talking about, or what I'm saying anyway, sort of comes through, regardless, or maybe you just turn me down, I don't know, and just listen to Brian, which would be an interesting show in itself, I think, if you just heard Brian.
Man talks to self? That's the show I tape in the car.
You could improv it at home. Just turn me down. So we're working on that. And also, we've been getting some notes from people about the frequency of the episode. We try to do it about once a month, but we're stepping it up.
Yeah.
And we're trying to do maybe 2 a month if we can, or, every few weeks, and then we do a mini one, and then, the next one, and so on. Because, again, if you want it, and people are asking for it, we're gonna do more. It's nice to hear the comments, because that kind of motivates us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I get so much of that through YouTube and through Twitter that it's like it's like I'm really grateful to hear it. I'm glad people want to hear more of us. And it's not like we don't like each other. It's not like behind the scenes we're fighting. So let's just do more of this. This is fun. It's Yeah, and it's hard to gauge. Just, I mean, I see some familiar faces, with the comments, and I hear stuff from Brian. But it's hard to really gauge just what the audience is or how big it is, I think. So it's good, like I say, it's good to know that, and we're gonna do more because we love doing it, and God knows we have plenty of crap to talk about. Oh sure, yeah.
So I just wanted to say that before we got into celebrating the work of Jack Kirby, and
now I want
whatever else we're going to
bring
talk about.
something on you that I wondered if you knew, because on Twitter today somebody came after Plaid Stallions. Did you know this? There's an alternate ending to Flash Gordon? Is this real?
The movie?
Yes.
The movie?
Yeah, I was just sent a picture of Ming standing in what looks like a skull. It looks like
Skeletor's... the Clytus mask.
Yeah.
The Clytus mask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I'm so fascinated with this movie. And when I did it's one of these things that there has never been a making of sort of documentary. The closest we've gotten is Life After Flash, which Lisa Downs, produced and directed, and I'm in it. But it's mainly to do with the film that sort of exists. There's lots of stuff that we talked about that didn't make it into the movie about the making of stuff. So that's the closest we've ever gotten to this.
Okay.
There's not a lot of printed stuff out there. There's not a lot of websites devoted to the ins and outs. There's some stuff, and a lot of this stuff is still kind of a mystery. For example, I know for certain that Sam Jones' voice was dubbed through about 75-80% of the movie because he didn't come back for ADR.
Didn't we figure out? You told we kind of figured out who that was too.
We thought Lisa thought that she did, but it turned out that wasn't the case, and it's still this mystery, and nobody knows who this guy was.
Oh,
it's clearly a British actor doing an American accent.
I thought she nailed
with the way it sort of.
Oh.
She thought she did, but apparently that wasn't. It was one of the Jerry Anderson shows, and it wasn't that guy. Apparently.
Oh,
so stuff like that. In addition, there are sequences. There's one sequence that Melody Anderson talks about in an issue of Starlog, where she sat in makeup for like 5 hours to be made up like a spider woman, like not like a superhero, but like a spider. Like she had, prosthetics on her face and weird hair, and then these feet that came out, or arms or whatever, and this weird bizarre thing she's talking about. And then she said, right when she's about ready to go on to the set, Mike Hodges, the director, said, "You know what? We're going to cut this scene. We're not going to do this scene." And they never did it. I have no idea what she's talking about, but it's something to do with maybe something, Flash had drank a potion or something, and then he saw her this way, or I don't know what, but some kind of weird sequence that never got filmed that she was in makeup for. And there's other shots that have shown up, set shots and behind the scenes stuff like that, where in addition, so you've got that shot of Ming with all those skulls around him. Well, Peter Wingard talked about it when I did the BAFTA thing, the 35th anniversary at BAFTA, and moderated that. They were talking about Clytus was going to come back in the next one. The idea was that there were many Clytuses. I think the idea that Wingard had must have come from something that was shot that we never saw, that has to do with that room, as if Ming was in there once Clytus is dead, and then puts the mask on something else and it becomes Clytus, or, I don't know. There's lots of weird stuff like that we try to pick up the crumbs and figure out what, because I think there was a lot of stuff that, as we've talked about, the translation between the English, in the script with the Italian crew and Dino De Laurentiis, there was a lot of stuff that didn't quite translate very well. And I think there were a lot of running changes that were made during the movie. There's a lot of stuff that they had to do without Sam. When Sam never came back, they shot a lot of stuff with a body double, for different sequences. And I think there's a good chunk of stuff that never sort of made it into the film. And I think that's probably what someone's talking about. I don't know if the footage exists, but I've certainly never seen anything extra that come out of that movie. Nothing has been done for it, really.
Okay. I just was really curious because I didn't know that, and I thought, well, if anyone will know that, it's you, and you did. Okay, so not that I was trying to stump you.
So you won that.
What bet?
Yeah, that's what I think is. I think that someone would assume that there's an alternate ending, and I'm sure there were different things that were shot, but I've certainly never seen the footage.
Oh man, that bothers me. Yeah. I would like to see more of that world.
Yeah, I keep in this world where like everything, no offense, but I know like the Return of Swamp Thing got a deluxe Blu-ray thing with extras and interviews and everything else.
It sure did.
You'd think something like Flash Gordon, this legendary movie now, would get some kind of 2-disc Blu-ray deluxe thing with every interview you can think of, and no one's done it. They've never.
Thing is a legendary film as well.
Yes, it is legendary in a way. It is legendary as well. Yes.
Hey, I can talk to the director on Facebook. I really like him.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. That's nice. One of the guys, speaking of social media, one of the guys that was designer on Rogue One and Solo started following me on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
I have no idea how or why. I've never talked about Solo on there, but he liked something I wrote, and he started following me. So that's kind of cool.
I think the biggest follower I picked up this month is an actor who played Jason in a couple of the Friday the 13th movies. Twitter mentioned.
Oh, nice.
Made special notice of it, and it's like neat.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but that's pretty noteworthy. All right.
I'm also friends on Twitter with Carrie Fisher's dog, Gary the dog.
Wow.
And Carrie used to write for the dog. Like something would get posted, and then she'd write. And I became friends, but thanks for the ad, and I sent her a picture of Bowie on Twitter. And she's like, pretty cute. Have you got any nude? And then I posted it. I posted another picture of Bowie with kind of his belly, kind of his legs a little spread, and I posted that, and then it never got a response. But in a way, I've had a conversation with Carrie Fisher.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I was over the moon. One month I got Elvira to retweet me and Jane Badler to retweet me.
Wow.
And it was like, all I need is Marky Post, and I have my 80s, sexual fantasy trio here. But
you sure you're not thinking of Donnie Most?
Not thinking of Donnie Most. No, that was the 70s.
Okay.
I was really into Donnie. Okay. That's when the sun
Marky Post from the Fall Guy. I
prefer to be Marky Post from Night Court, but sure.
Yeah. A couple years ago, I saw her at like a CVS. She was walking around, and I had to do like a triple take because, it's been a few years, but it was definitely Marky Post. Yeah.
And you didn't bother her while she was buying like disposable razors and mouthwash?
I didn't. I didn't have it in me.
The only thing I'll ever do to a celebrity if I run into them like that is like nod. I can't bother really famous people if they're in action.
No. I love it when you sort of they comment on something, they start a conversation somehow.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of like, oh, well, technically she started this conversation talking about the disposable razors or whatever,
Yeah.
And then you kind of have a little chat, and then you might go, hey, I really enjoy your work, by the way. And they usually really love it because nobody stops them anymore. So kind of makes their day.
My friend and I got stuck in an elevator with Kitten Natividad from Russ Meyer movies once. And we both did not know what to say to her. We just both stood there and nodded and smiled while we waited. And it's like,
if ever there's a good time to talk, it's in a stalled elevator.
There was a 13-year-old inside me going, "Are you kidding me?" But anyway, let's get on to the King before
let's do it. King Kirby.
What was your first exposure to Jack Kirby?
Well, it's funny you say that because we've talked about this before with other topics, and the memory of something without really knowing what it was.
Okay.
And so I don't think I knew exactly who Jack Kirby was, probably until, my junior high or something to really know.
Really?
I might have recognized the name. No, but what I mean is that is just the art that I always associated with Marvel Comics.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting.
But his versions of, from the 70s, his versions of Captain America, and sort of with the fist coming out towards you and the other hand up and back, and that just was Marvel Comics to me. I didn't totally understand what I was, Right, exactly. Those Hulk shots, and I didn't know at the time exactly who he was, but I knew that I loved this stuff, and then the more you start to see it, the more you kind of recognize it. And then there was the 2001 comic. I think they did like deluxe, like big deluxe type versions of it.
Treasury editions.
Treasury editions.
Yeah.
Somebody had that. Either the kid down the street, Mark, or it was my brother Gino. I forget. And that one had sort of hit me like, oh, this is the same guy that does this other stuff that I like. Because of just the way you can just spot his stuff from a mile away, sort of. And then the appreciation just grew as I got older.
I've been meaning to buy that 2001 Treasury edition just because it's something I'd like to reevaluate. I think in LA or something there's a museum that reproduced it, and they did a whole art show on it I was reading about.
They did. In fact, they had it at the Kirby booth at Comic-Con this year. They had it. Yeah, they made this massive repro of the Treasury edition of 2001, and it's like, it's the size of a hatchback, like a Honda.
It's never been reprinted, huge. Has it?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I know there were individual issues, but I don't know about
I remember them. In fact, like the Treasury edition, you brought that up. That was my first introduction to Kirby, and that was a Fantastic Four Treasury edition. It's probably one of the first. I still have it. It's not in great shape. That and the Spider-Man Treasury edition were the first comics I really remember reading, and of course, it was Ditko Spider-Man in large format, and Kirby Fantastic Four, and the Kirby stuff knocked my socks off. I remember this was a period I got them probably when I was 5, and I couldn't read to the the first grade a year later, and I can honestly remember like poring over that, going, I want to know what's going on in this, and learning to read. That was the thing that was like, click, okay, now I understand the story. And
right.
The stories in there I could probably act out for you. They left such an impression on me. Like and they're good ones, right? The Doctor Doom's getting his revenge on the Fantastic Four. That's one of the stories. The other story is Submariner Returns, which of course is a classic. And the third story is in the book is This Man, This Monster, which is very Thing centric.
Oh yeah, the Thing one. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Awesome. And the thing I will remember forever about Kirby is, and you're a child, I think he actually affected my spatial reasoning, because when you can't read and you're looking at this stuff and it's just ideas and concepts and that is the thing that always, and the energy of it, and it's not boring, even though I couldn't read. I would go through it and go like, okay, I think what's going on here is, and I was totally wrong. I was totally wrong. But I loved all of those things in there. Other dimensions and lost kingdoms and monsters and so I was immediately a fan. And of course, I probably mentioned this before, but like Captain America is one of my favorite superheroes of all time. So
yeah, me too.
And Falcon, Captain America and Falcon, that era.
That was comics. That's one of the few books I read as a kid, was the Captain America and the Falcon book. Yeah. That title, and then that Mad Bomb story, the Kirby Mad Bomb story, is one of the first.
Oh yeah, I had that too.
Things that I would get every. I'd have my brother grab it for me, or like, can you get the new count? And I kind of knew. I didn't really know who Kirby was when I was 7 or whatever, 6 or 7. I knew his stuff.
Yeah, and I wanted to tell you too that when we sold my grandmother's house last year, and we had delayed the estate for a long time, and I was going through the last few things, and it turns out that everything I ever drew, she kept.
Oh wow!
And that was a very emotional day for me, and I found this comic, and it must have been probably 1976 or 1977. I'm barely, and I'm pretty sure that I had just gotten the Mego Falcon doll. But if I can find it, I'll put it up with the podcast. But it's Fanstick 4. Because I can't spell.
Fantastic.
Featuring the Falcon.
Amazing.
And it is a note for note. I'm stealing the story from the Treasury edition. Dr. Doom comes back. He kidnaps all the Fanstick 4. And then the Falcon beats the shit out of Dr. Doom. And they're saved. And it's just... it's so... That's where my head was at that time. That's what comics were to me.
That's amazing.
And
that's amazing.
You mentioned the 2001 individual issues, and this is where, as a kid I loved Kirby, and then I was just there this week. We have a thing called the CNE, the Canadian National Exhibition, and it's a midway. There's vendors, it's a tourist thing. During, I think, around from 1980 to 1982, it's only 2 weeks in the summer, my sister would end up working and living there. And she's a few years my senior, and my father, a self-employed man and overprotective as hell, would show up every day. Right? So for 2 weeks in the summer, I was let go on a midway for ever. Here's $20, and they had freaks back then, and dark rides, and the woman turning into the gorilla. I was in heaven, but there was a comic booth. Every year there was a card booth and a comic booth, and this is why I'm the geek I am today. The comic booth was selling back issues, which blew my mind, and they were all number ones. Devil Dinosaur, 2001, Machine Man.
Oh, cool.
And I bought all those thinking, oh, wow, they're number ones. These guys are idiots. These are going to be worth a fortune. And the other side, the card guy, I was buying Space 1999 cards and UFO stickers, and I didn't know what UFO was, and that never came up in my life again.
Wait, how old were you when you found UFO stickers?
10.
Wow.
And I was just kept buying them, going, "What is this show? This is so neat." And on the last day of the X, my dad kept going. He was trying to sell stuff to carnies and what have you. And we went to the comic booth on the end, and the guy said, "You know, I have a store, right?" And my dad took me to my first comic book store, which was the Silver Snail on Queen Street. This was about 1981. And
wow,
I bought more Kirby issues. But Kirby, I was buying all the 70s Kirby stuff because I was getting number ones, you know? And I bought the number one of Raiders there, too. Like, there's a...
It's like a 4-issue series, and then they put a compilation together.
Yeah,
I think for Raiders it was like 4 issues, or
But I walked into the vendors building at the X this year with my kids, and there's a lavender cart, and there's always a lavender cart there, and I'm immediately I just associate that with those comics. It's really a weird association. Yeah.
No, it's like a lot of stuff we talk about. Like you have that. You know, the first time you bought that magazine at that store or whatever, and just every time you drive past it, it's like this
the smells,
sense memory. The smells, all of it. No, totally.
But I just remember driving home, reading those comics every night, you know, and it's just
well. Then I got like, you know, they used to do those paperback editions of like they'd put comics together in like a paperback book.
I got stacks of
those. And I had some of those.
Yeah.
And I remember that you know that famous shot in a Fantastic Four issue where Doctor Doom, the door opens up and the Fantastic Four are trapped and they're coming into this dinner and Doctor Doom is at the end of the table and reaching out like you know, which they riffed on in Empire Strikes Back with Vader.
Totally.
They kind of did, you know, that was in there, and I remember seeing that. And the other thing was, now that I'm kind of like, you know, 11 or 12 or kind of understanding, you know, who Kirby is or what his work, you know, looks like. Because I had like a Batman compilation, this hardcover that I still have, that had stuff up to like the early 70s, a lot of the Neil Adams stuff, and that's what I associate most with Batman.
Is that Batman to the 1930s to the 1970s with like it's a dust jacket on it? Is that the book you're thinking of? Because I have that as well.
I don't have the dust jacket, but I've got the book, and it's like. So, and it's blue, right? It's like a blue cover with the Batman logo.
Cover galleries on it. Yeah. It's got a lot of Two-Face stories for some reason. Yeah.
That was like my Batman internet when I was a kid. That's what kind of weaned me
I have the Superman
on the Batman
one too as a kid.
And so I had some of those like paperback things where I kind of started to understand, you know, who Kirby was. Like, so Neil Adams I associate with Batman, you know, or vice versa, and then Kirby is Marvel to me, but then like certain characters, you know, like I think of Steranko's stuff, like his Captain America stuff and his Nick Fury stuff as like one of my favorite things of all time. Like as much as I love Kirby, like that, what he did in that short amount of time, everything. But Kirby is who I mostly associate with. But then I remember, you know, watching the opening credits of Thundarr the Barbarian.
Oh yeah,
and there's a villain in the opening, I forget the name of the character that I think was probably going to be made into Wave 2 if they ever made those figures, where its head spins around. And then another face. And I remember seeing that every Saturday morning and going, why did that look familiar to me?
Yeah,
why did that?
I didn't make that connection until adulthood.
And it was until I knew many years later that Kirby worked on the show. And of course that dude looks like a Kirby dude. And it sort of Ookla does. And all of it starts to kind of make sense.
Yeah.
But it's funny how that child, you know, brain sort of goes, well, that looks familiar. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know why I know that. You know, I wouldn't know that he'd be working on the show. And he also worked on I didn't know it when I was 8, but when you watch the 1978 Fantastic Four, he worked on that too.
I wonder how he felt like about that. Because the show isn't very good. And
you mean how he felt about having to work on it?
I'm not a comic historian, but I think it's common knowledge that after a while he became kind of disenfranchised with the comic industry, and you know he had moved to LA or at least California, and he got into animation somehow, and felt more validated by animation at the time, pitching all his ideas and such. And I just wonder how he felt about working on a bastardized version of his creations, that he really, the only way he was getting paid for them was to actually work on the show, which is really,
there's a very sad story which people might know, but it's kind of heartbreaking the first time I heard it. You know that, what's his name, Mark Evanier?
Yeah.
EVAN. He was like tight with Kirby, and
he seems, if I'm not mistaken, he's very even keeled.
Very even keeled, and clearly, backwards and forwards. And like, he did that Kirby book that came out a few years ago. Alex did a piece for that book, and he knows the Kirby family and the history of Kirby, backwards and forwards. But I don't know if I saw an interview or I read it in a magazine or something where he was out with Jack and his wife. I think he was driving them, and Jack was in the back seat, she was in the front seat, but they had to stop somewhere, and she gets out of the car to do something, and they're sitting in the parking lot, and there's a Toys R Us right there. And Mark turns back to Jack and says, "Hey, she's going to be in there for a while. Should we go in the toy store and look around?" And Jack said no. And he's like, "Oh, okay," and then he kind of asked again, "You sure you don't want to just?" And he was like, "No," and he kind of was distant. And then it took a little while, but then Kirby said to him, "I can't go in there because I'm going to go in there and I'm going to see all this stuff, all these characters that I helped design or, had a part in or, helped create and so on, or like a Captain America toy shield or whatever, and see all that stuff and know that I don't get anything from any of this."
Yeah.
And that had to be like, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s or something when that happened, or when he told the story.
Oh yeah.
So I think there was a lot of that with Kirby too, and I think he lived long enough to understand, to see the appreciation. Yeah. Like he was a legend already, but then the geeks sort of grew up and they started, doing Comic-Cons and things like that, where he started to get that kind of adulation, and he loved going to those things. But I think it's kind of like, it's like when I did that horror festival a few years back and did the thing about Jack Pierce, the makeup artist for all the Universal stuff. And I talked to Rick Baker because I ran into him at this thing, and we started talking. I said, "Yeah, I did the Jack Pierce thing the other day." And, I was just kind of geeking out with Rick Baker, but in a cool way, like not like, oh, it was like, "Hey, what do you, of all the stuff that you've done, what are you most proud of, or what can you look back on and be the most proud of," or something? And he said American Werewolf, because he said, "I think about the budget that we had, how quickly we did it, how we did it in daylight, yada, yada, yada." And then I started talking about Jack Pierce. And I said, did he understand toward the end of his life just what? And he said, "Yeah, but he was very angry and very bitter about it."
Yeah.
Because once again, all this merchandise, all the Frankenstein stuff that's out there, that's Jack Pierce.
Yeah.
That's all Jack Pierce coming up with that.
I never think of that.
Yeah. He did the Widow's Peak on Lugosi. He did The Man Who Laughs, Conrad Veidt, the thing that inspired the Joker. That was Jack Pierce. The Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster. Invisible Man.
I never really thought that he would be. Yeah, but he lived through the '60s monster craze, and I think he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And he was not. He was kind of. Baker said he was kind of a bitter old man. Became kind of a bitter old man.
Yeah.
I guess. Which I suppose makes sense. But I think Kirby had a bit of that. But I think he saw the appreciation. Toward the end of his life.
I never heard anything bad about, like, fans. Never say he was really kind to fans, even when he wasn't. There was some article. I think I have maybe 2 issues of the Jack Kirby Collector. And there was one guy who wrote an article about how he published his first comic and gave Kirby a copy. And Kirby had said something to him like, "Okay, you did it. You made it. Now get out of this business. It'll eat you alive." And just told him this horrible thing. And he writes in this article, I thought Jack was just a bitter old kook, or something to the point of that. He said, now, years later, I realized I was terrible. You know, and Kirby just didn't.
You think Kirby was trying to tell him, like,
Yeah,
don't bother?
He thinks that Kirby was just trying to, like, kid, you know, he was doing a nice way of telling him not to get into the industry, but really, he wasn't good enough. It was a funny piece. One of my what's that?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, one of my favorite
go ahead.
pieces of Kirby is that he did some toy packaging briefly for Mattel in the early 70s.
Oh yeah, was it Big Jim?
He did Big Jim's Wolf Pack. He seemed to do. I don't know if he did the design work on those characters, but he did the packaging art. And he did some of the vehicles, and then he was replaced by John Buscema. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Buscema
for the second run, and I think that's because they worked with Marvel on getting the comic done for the packaging. But
right.
And he also did a Tarzan package, Tarzan stuff from Mattel in the mid 1970s.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was it the which one? The one that's kind of the Big Jim body? The Tarzan with the big Jim
mean,
body?
Just
kind of
Tarzan toys in general. The weird nondescript Tarzan toys that Mattel made. I'll try and find it and put it on this episode because they're definitely worth it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So
wow, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
That Kirby did that.
I wish that the original art for the Big Jim Wolf Pack existed. And one of the things I want to mention, and I wish I had a really good copy of this, but I've got somewhere pictures of the Mexican version of one of the Big Jim vehicles, and of course the Mexican Big Jim characters are different. You know, they got an invisible guy and a bionic guy. Mm-hmm. And somebody has painstakingly taken the Kirby artwork and drawn over it, and it's bad,
wow.
It's badass. And I've got to figure out where that is. I gotta contact my buddy Jesus about that because I know he owns one of those vehicles. So
yeah, isn't there also like the Mexican stuff? It was Big Jim, but it said James Bond 007.
Yeah, that's a weird. I'm not
that weird.
Yeah, and Dr. Steele's become a villain that looks almost exactly like a villain out of a Matt Helm movie. I think there's a villain in Murderer's Row that has like a steel plate on top of his head, and at the end, Matt Helm uses a magnet. You know, like we all knew he would.
As you do,
yeah, to capture him, but yeah, that's a bizarre line. I don't know if they had real licensing for that.
Yeah, I've never gotten a straight answer on what the hell that is, or whether it was actually licensed.
Because the rest
it was
of
an actual licensed thing.
The official
but it's just a few products. There's like a
004.
vehicle.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But the Mexican stuff has 007. You said something about you were talking about the animation stuff that he did, and he then worked on Thundarr, right? Like he did a lot of design for that and the original characters and stuff, right? Didn't he?
Yeah,
Thundarr the Barbarian?
He absolutely did, and I believe Thundarr was created by Steve Gerber.
Steve Gerber,
Yeah.
that's right. He did Howard the Duck, and he wrote. Didn't he write the Conan comic too, or something before he did Howard the Duck or something? Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think Steve Gerber created Howard the Duck. In fact, I think he fought Marvel for ownership of it. And if I'm not mistaken, his legal battle was funded by a comic called Destroyer Duck that had Jack Kirby artwork. Now I gotta know if I'm right.
Oh, wow.
Remember Comic Scene when you were a kid? The Starlog comic
yeah,
scene?
sure.
I remember reading something about that. That was, at the height of their legal battle against Marvel, Kirby and Gerber teamed up and created Destroyer Duck. I am correct. I remember
now,
that. Now,
here's a question that maybe you can answer.
Okay.
Is, I know I bring up Alex now and then, but it's like the guy's like Wikipedia, and he doesn't go on the internet, so I can ask him anything about the history of comics, and he's going to have an answer. Like, it's just ridiculous the way his brain works. And I've been trying to get an answer about, like, I'm fascinated by that period in the mid to late 60s kind of thing, where the tide sort of turned and Marvel became this go-to place for hip people and, college campuses, and it was the cool comic to be reading and stand soapbox and all that. And like, when specifically it sort of became this entity that the counterculture sort of latched onto. And I'm trying to narrow down when it started to happen.
60s. But college kids were into Marvel 60s, when they were fresh off the shelves.
And it was. I think it must have been an offshoot of like, The Hobbit was really big, and like the Lord of the Rings books. And you see in these comics where like Peter Parker's wearing a T-shirt that says Frodo lives or something. It was all part of that same kind of soup, and people were getting more into sci-fi and stuff like that.
There's very good signs of it. There's some paperbacks that came out around that time that are, I think, to capture on the zeitgeist of that. So there's some like late '60s Marvel books.
Well, it's those. Do you have those two books, right? The collector's books, the Golden Age, Silver Age. Collectibles, Marvel stuff. Did we talk about those? Do you have those books?
I have one of them. I think I have the 70s one. Yeah.
Okay, so the one before that, the first edition, I'm looking through this thing, and I just had no awareness that there was like a Doctor Strange T-shirt made in 1965 or something. Yeah,
there's some really...
Or that there was that it's like, wow, I really didn't think this stuff took off until 67, 68 or whatever. Like these characters that are on products way back then, it kind of puts it in a new
light. It's very house brand too. They did like inflatable pillows, and that stuff is so collectible too. That early mid,
and it goes back a lot earlier than I thought.
Yeah.
That people were. I mean, I guess I didn't even understand that Spider-Man, once you hear the story about the Ben Cooper costume, and like when that first one came out, you realize, wow, that's not long after the character first hit.
Yeah.
But this really was, this stuff, was big, and there was this huge following. But the question is like, when exactly did Kirby become this brand?
Yeah.
Like, when did it become like, hey, guess who's working on this one? Or guess who's coming? Because I know he left in the early 70s, went over to DC, and then came back to Marvel in 75 or 76 or something.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it...
Do you know when that sort of happened?
I do.
It became a household name?
Well, I think as soon as stuff like like when he teamed up with Lee, one of, like, love him or hate him, Lee promoted those people as celebrities.
And, totally.
And that's when things changed, when he stopped becoming just the anonymous artist of this book and became Jack Kirby. I mean, putting people's names on comics, it seems so common and everyday now, but that was unheard of back then. Pick up any Gold Key comic from the 60s and who drew it, who wrote it, nobody knows.
Well, and that's why, as much as there's a lot of people out there that loathe Stan Lee, and I'm sure there are things that he's done that make him not so nice, but that's what I always say in his defense, was like, he put, faces to these artists or names to these books, and guess who's going to be on this one? And, unfortunately they didn't get financial recognition that they, should have or hoped to or whatever, but I don't know if anybody did,
It's
that's a whole weird thing.
It's a whole thing.
Somebody had to be the guy out. Well, somebody had to be the guy out front. George Lucas and Walt Disney didn't do it all. There were hundreds of people they stood on the shoulders of that did stuff and that made things and that designed things. But they're kind of the one out front that sort of tends to get the credit because they're the brand. They're sort of who gets branded with it. But Lee did a lot to get those people recognition in those books.
Yeah, I think he did, and I think, again, I don't want to get into the Stan versus Jack debate because some people get really, really angry and vicious about it. I've seen some online fights that are like, God, what is this? Like, it's a debate. we all weren't in the bullpen. We all don't know. I mean, we have our ideas and opinions, but I've seen some people just get like frothing about it, and it's like this is very weird for me. I think one of the things I think of when I regardless of what you think who did what, I think the partnership really clicked and really worked, and I think the same of Lee and Ditko, Lee and Kirby. I thought they really connected and had something. And the thing I always think of is none of them, after they all split, it was never quite the same. Lee's work wasn't as good. I think I love some of the stuff he did for DC after he left Marvel, especially Commandy and Mr. Miracle and that. But there's a quality to them, and there's something. Again, it's just all these ideas, but the dialogue and the structure.
I know what you're going to say, and I'm going to say this, and it's probably going to get me in trouble with people, but whatever. That not everybody. I mean, Stan did what he did very, very well. Yeah. Some of the arguments that people use about the books was that, Kirby plotted it. Kirby's really the one who plotted it, wrote in a bunch of dialogue as he's doing these panels, and then Stan would come in and polish it and make it what it was. Well, I've read stuff like that Captain America Mad Bomb book from '76. The writing is his stuff on its own, as a writer and an artist, is just not up to snuff with the other Marvel stuff and the other writers that worked on those books. And I think that's one of the things that pissed him off, that he wanted more recognition and wanted to be the one to write stuff, whatever. And I think Stan, like you say, love him or hate him, he seemed to be able to step back and know who had what talent and who was being used the right way.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that he's the one that was the kind of master of the dialogue and a lot of this stuff. And some of the Jack stuff is just, it's gorgeous to look at, but he tends to. Did you ever see that one that he did? I don't know when this was, but he did a book that didn't get published. But you probably saw it like in the Kirby Collector or something, where he tells his childhood story of growing up like in the streets of Brooklyn or something, or wherever he's from. Running around with these kids like the dead end kids, and they're all kind of, and then there's going to be a stickball game down by the playground, and then we go there, and he just tells me like this rough and tumble, like he's Chaplin, tramp, sort of walking through. Well,
he did grow up in that very, in that time, you know?
He did, but everything he writes in this book is like, if somebody, trips and falls, it's like, there's crash, bam, wallop, and everything is just huge. Every sentence ends with an exclamation mark. Everything is huge and grandiose. Even just telling the tale that he did about, growing up as a kid on these streets or whatever. And he just, if you read some of his stuff, I've got some old issues, the Captain America and Falcon issues, because I found them at a comic shop a couple months ago, and I just thought, this would be fun to look through these. Every sentence ends with an exclamation mark. Everything that he writes, there's something huge, happening in this sentence, or like every other word is bold-faced. He just wasn't as good at the dialogue and stuff.
And the other thing was, and I hate to be, but like when I was coming into comics, when I started 12 years old, I found a lot of his work, like this isn't just him, I was just having this discussion with my son last night where he was saying, my son was saying, I'm not liking Jim Lee's work anymore. And it's like, everybody kind of, I think everyone hits a wall sometimes, creatively, and that can be true for writers and it can be true for artists. But I was telling him my story of disappointment with Kirby, because I used to just buy anything he did at that point, and it's gorgeous, but it's also weird. Is that I was in a variety store one day and there was a comic called Battle for a 3D World, and it was a sealed baggie with 3D glasses, and I could tell whose art it was, and God, I had to have it because it was 3D, and at that point, I would go to any movie that was in 3D. That was a really, really important thing for me at that time. So I saved up the $5 or whatever it was. It was expensive. I remember that. And I bought this 3D comic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where it's more or less selling the concept, and they just let Kirby go nuts with it. And his stuff in 3D is really fun to look at. But it's not a memorable... I think that... What was the name of the character in it? First of all, it's not... It was actually not written by Kirby, which I wish it kind of was. But the art is, the art is nice, but he's starting to kind of... what is the name of that? I want to just go through. I just remember being kind of disappointed with it. Stallion is the name of the character. Yeah. No, his art. When I look at it now, his artwork was great, but I think a lot better than I remember it actually. But just after that, he did the. And I'm sorry, the story's going over. He did the Superpowers.
Oh, it's
he did the Superpowers miniseries for DC Comics.
Okay.
And I was stoked to get that. And I do not think it's good. I'll be honest with you.
There seems to be a lot of affection for it. I don't know. I don't think I ever read it. But people seem to love the book too.
Yeah,
right?
I wasn't fond of the art, and I don't think his heart was in it when I look at it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll get lynched for it. But I remember thinking like, And then of course he was doing a comic at the time. He was working for Independence at the time, and that was a shame. I thought he deserved more, but he was working for Pacific Comics. I think he was doing something called Captain. Do you remember this? Captain Universe or? Yeah.
No.
Oh God.
No.
Not Captain Universe. Kirby Captain. Sorry, I have to do this. Everyone, I'm just gonna get.
He did some stuff toward like in the. Wouldn't he die in '96 or something?
He died in 1994.
He was doing some 94 because he was doing some new stuff like in the early '90s. They were putting out new.
Yeah, like Bomb Blast.
I forget what they were.
Weird stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Captain Victory and the Galactic Rangers. That was it. And I've never read these comics, but I have read that they're a bit. That there's a bit of. They're kind of bizarre. So.
Like, I'm looking at this. I don't normally do this when we do the show to look at anything that's for reference, but I've got the Silver Age collectibles book here.
Oh, yeah.
And first of all, a ton of the merchandise that was being made, like 66 Incredible Hulk and Thing sweatshirts. It's Kirby art.
Oh, yeah.
But I can't believe that in 1966 there was a Thing sweatshirt.
Yeah,
that was made.
that's bugging you, eh? But they sold like 500,000 issues a month.
But that's the thing. They would talk about sales of the issues. You didn't know. Let's say you put the May issue out in April or something, and here comes the May issue. You didn't get the results of how that thing did for months. Like you couldn't. You did. They didn't know for I think 2 or 3 months just how much this thing sold. So everything had to sort of, assume they were going to make at least 4 or 5 issues and hope it did well because they had that stuff in the hopper, to get going.
But they would get tons of letters. And
yes, they did. And I knew that the comic had the popularity they did back then. I guess I didn't realize that in 1965 there was a Daredevil T-shirt that was made. I didn't know that he was well known enough in '65 to get his own T-shirt.
That does seem. Yeah, I guess they just invested in the shirt.
Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos. There's a Kirby T-shirt there. Daredevil, Doctor Strange, which is Ditko art. But yeah, I mean, just about everything in here. A ton of the merchandise that was made. It's all Kirby. It's all Kirby's art on the packaging.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And like I said, I was very I didn't say it. I was very happy to see the Kirby family get a settlement from Disney.
Yeah.
Over these movies. I mean, it's long overdue.
Yeah.
And you look at a movie like Thor Ragnarok, and you go, "There's so much."
Oh, I love it.
There's just so much here.
I love that they did that. I love that they.
Yeah.
that's where they chose to go with it, with the sets and the guards, and because I've always wanted to be able to get that, like, we're never quite going to get that. I don't think we're ever going to get a full-on Kirby, because I don't think you could. I don't know if you could. Like, if you couldn't translate what he did or his.
I think his stuff looks amazing, though. Like,
it does. No, I'm sorry. It does, but it's not. The thing about it is that and again, talking to Alex, he's someone that, and you may be like this too, because the way you sort of see. The whole thing is, like, I don't know much about art, but I know what I like, sort of thing. Like, I can look at something and go, aesthetically, that's not. Whereas you and Alex might look at it and focus on the neck and why the neck isn't right and why the chin should be out a little bit more, the head should be different, like with costumes and things like that, because he tends to think completely visually. And when he talks about this stuff, we had a great chat one time about Kirby, and Kirby's art is insane. It doesn't. Yeah. They don't look. There's no real attempt to look like a human face. There's a structure there, but none of it makes any sense. And the closest thing I can think of, and I said this to him, and he literally dropped the phone. I'm like, Michael Shannon. Like, Michael Shannon has a Kirby face. Like, if you could, he has got. If you could put that face in a Mr. Miracle or something, or make a movie, that's the guy you get, because that's the way he draws faces. They just kind of don't make sense. Their eyes are far apart.
I'll give a weird confession. I find Kirby women really attractive. I always have.
They're big and meaty. Really tough.
That upsets the hell out of my wife, who is not a fan. She doesn't get it, and she's like, you don't. I was like, yeah, I think his Medusa and Crystal are honeys. I think they're just gorgeous.
There's something, why? Because there's something kind of Russ Meyer about them. That's why you like them.
Could be.
There's a little bit of that going on.
I have a theory about that too. I have a huge proportion issue. Like, if I'm looking at something and the hands are too big, or the head's too small, it really, I empathically, like, put it, like, there was a Toy Biz released a Riddler figure in the early 90s that he's holding a piece of paper, and if you look at it, his hands are just like just enormous, and he's got a pinhead. And I remember, like, picking up that card and going, and, like, putting it down because it bothered me. I never think of that with Kirby, because everything is so immersive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the people look that way, the buildings look this way, you just accept it for what it is, because everything is sort of uniform to his idea,
Mm-hmm.
I know he had some perspective issues occasionally, and there's some really funky, wild covers, but there's an OMAC cover that everyone, where he's throwing a guy in a bathtub, and it's just, it's a weird, but I just love that whole universe that he creates there.
I do too. And it's, again, when you mention someone like Jim Lee, for example, like, I look at Jim Lee and I see a lot of stuff out there that is interchangeable to me. If I look at Kirby or Steranko or even Alex or whoever, you know who it is when you see that work, and Kirby's stuff. There's no mistaking it. And that's part of the attraction to it, is that it's just mental. Like, the proportions and the design, it's gorgeous and it works perfectly for what it is, but it's stylized. There's not a huge attempt to make these make them more recognizable as humans. There's a 1968 frame tray puzzle by Whitman in here. 1968 with the Fantastic Four fighting the Black Panther.
That's right.
The first Black Panther item. There's a sparkle paint that too. That
has the Silver Surfer, which is from '67, which I guess was the first Silver Surfer thing. But this 60 stuff is fascinating, and how much of this stuff is it's all Kirby. Like we talked about this before. It's another thing that again I wouldn't have known at the time, but I understood that it was Kirby, but didn't exactly know that it was Kirby. For example, and Kirby did. That's the thing about Black Panther, right? It was going to be it was Kirby and Lee, right? Black Panther.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So and that was it was going to be the initial mask was going to be open from the nose down, the chin, like Batman's mask. And that way you'd know it was a black guy. And Marvel said, you can't do that. No way. We won't be able to sell that comic, in parts of the country. You can't do it. That's why the mask.
So we'll fool the kids.
Exactly. That's
like
why
he kept his mask.
I know. Yeah, but do you remember these? They're in here, and this is one of the things I was kind of looking for, and I don't know what the company was here. Philadelphia Chewing Gum Corporation. They made these Marvel superhero stickers that, and these aren't the ones. I have the ones from the '70s, but they're like goofy, like there's a picture of Iron Man scratching his helmet, his head.
Yeah, there's wacky captions.
It says, "Let's see now, what's good for Russ?" Or like Spider-Man, it'll say, "You were expecting, Little Miss Muffet," or whatever. A lot of that artwork.
There's that cynicism in there. Yeah. They couldn't just sell straight superhero stuff. They had to make them wacky.
It was Kirby, and again, that's a very strong childhood memory. That those stickers. That my first grade teacher, if you did something good or you cleaned the chalkboard or whatever, you got to stick your hand in a coffee can that she had that had little treats in it, and pull some out. And I was hooked on those superhero stickers, and so I would feel around for the card and then pull that out and get a new one each time. And then I stuck them on my wooden headboard in my bedroom when I was about 7.
Yeah.
Like an idiot. And I don't know how my parents...
An idiot, like every kid.
I don't know how my parents... What took them so long, because I kept building this library on the headboard. And then one day, finally, my mother saw it and went, "What are you doing?" And they freaked out because they couldn't get the stickers off the headboard, and I'd ruined it, basically.
Dude, I ruined my bedroom. I had built-in desk and cabinet into the walls. And, I had the Topps Empire Strikes Back cards. And I was able to spell Brian with the letters. Remember how they had letters?
I never could figure that out, why they did that. It was the dumbest idea.
I loved it. And I remember friends coming over going, "Oh, you got an R!" Like the... I guess the kid's named Richard and stuff. Like R was really valuable.
I never understood that. I could never figure that out. Why they did letters.
Letters with photos of like Luke Skywalker. I don't know. Why not?
It was just dumb. It was so dumb. I never understood
I was into it. This kid loved it.
So yeah, a lot of the Kirby stuff I think of too is not just the books I was getting as a kid. Was all the damn merchandise. Well,
yeah, for sure. Not seeing a dime of the, especially the late '60s and then probably the '70s. It was probably really. I can see his point. And I, regardless of where I feel about the Stan Lee relationship, he did get screwed, and he deserved better accolade. And even though his family got some money now, he deserved to be living when he got his art back, and I think he never got his original art back.
Well,
I've also heard stories that people kind of took advantage of him as he got older, and that just disgusts me.
Well, it's funny you say that, because when I was at Comic-Con, I started to look at these limited edition prints that were done, and there was one that there was a stack of Captain America signed by Kirby, Lee, and Joe Simon, I think, had all signed these things. But that's the thing, is and I'm sure they're not listening, but you're suddenly talking to the guy who runs the booth, and it's kind of like,
what are these and where did these sort of come from? Oh, well, that was a thing that I worked on back in the late 80s. It was what we did, 1986, and we did it. And then I got Stan to sign a bunch, and then what I did was took over to Joe. And by the time he finishes the story, I'm looking at this staff stuff going, I don't know if this is any of their signatures. I don't know if he just stuck a pen in their hands and told them to do it. I don't know, because it was like, I think the one print was like $250 and one was like $350 or something. And I have no way to gauge what that stuff is worth.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seemed like there was a lot of that stuff that toward the end of his life, it was like stick a pen in his hand and give him a few bucks to sign.
And it's going on with Stan Lee right now a little bit. Too.
Yeah. That's a whole, that's a whole weird thing about the daughter and the money and all that.
Oh yeah.
Strangeness, but yeah. So that's. But yeah, like I said, I think he, by the time you got to, because there were those, comic book conventions and Marvel conventions in the mid '70s and stuff that I think he was probably treated like a rock star.
Those weren't. You treated like a rock star, but you probably didn't make a lot of money doing them either. I mean,
no, and that's why I think I would imagine something like Thundarr or the Fantastic Four, the animated shows, like that was probably kind of a king's ransom for. At the time, if you worked on a regular show like that, don't you think? For something like Kirby,
it was probably. I think he deserved better in life.
No, I do too. I'm saying that's probably why it was so attractive to him to do things like that, was because it was a regular gig that paid probably more than what he was getting in comics.
Probably it's steady work, and maybe it was more rewarding. I know that. I think he worked on some pretty crummy shows too.
Did he work on the Thing cartoon on its own? Did he work on that one?
Oh, I hope not. I hope he didn't get subjected to doing that. That one would be just so sad.
Thing Ring, do your thing. Is that what he said in that?
Ring, oh, if he had to do that, I would. I know for a fact that no, he didn't have. I don't. Turbo Teen, that was the cartoon I was thinking of. That
Turbo Teen.
He wasn't so happy. Turbo Teen was where that kid turned into a car. Oh, it was horrible. Just horrible.
I don't even remember that. Turbo Teen.
Yeah. And I think he worked on Goldie Gold and Action Jack, which is a show I actually unironically enjoy.
Wait, Goldie Gold?
Goldie Gold and Action Jack.
Yeah, that was the one that was kind of a Raiders ripoff, right? It was like 81 or 82.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had that. We had Goldie Gold. We had Tales of the Gold Monkey. And we had Bring Him Back Alive, Bruce Boxleitner.
Oof, never saw that. Yeah.
Oh, I used to watch it every week because I'm like, that's the guy from Tron. And they're trying to make an Indiana Jones type show. It was awful. It was terrible. But you better believe I watched.
I think my wife's a fan. But I just reminded going through all this. Do you remember the Eternals comics?
I know of them, but not as a kid. No.
Yeah, I bought those as a kid and had no clue what was going on. I remember that really specifically, like being drawn to the Kirby art and going, "Oh yeah, I gotta have," and then going, I don't understand what's going on in this comic.
So when was that? What?
That was like mid. He returned to Marvel, and they gave him all these projects that I think he wanted to do. Like, obviously he got Captain America again. Mm-hmm. He got the Eternals. He did 2001. You must have heard about this, that they finally released his Prisoner.
Yes,
adapted the Prisoner.
That's how I was going to wrap up the show. That was my first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. That was my first purchase at Comic-Con this year.
Comic-Con?
Was that it's ginormous.
I haven't picked it up yet.
It's huge.
Is it?
Yeah, it's like right off the Masters. It's like this huge book. It's very thin, but it's the size of the panels that they would, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But I mean, half of it is Kirby, and the other half is Gil Kane. But yes, no, go ahead. Say what you were gonna. Go ahead and say what you're gonna say.
Our Canadian Comic Con is this weekend, and I might go pick that up.
Oh, you should get it. You should definitely get it because they did it where because Titan put it out, and what they did when you bought it at Comic Con, they also are publishing a new Prisoner comic that has nothing to do with McGoohan, but it's in that world, but it's not McGoohan's likeness. But what they did was they gave you a variant of issue 1, which took the Kirby cover of the big omnibus that came out, and Mike Allred, who does Madman, he inked it. He colored in the cover. So when you got the book, you got this free issue of issue 1 with that variant cover that it was colored in, the version of Kirby's art, but it was colored in, and that they might have that at the show when you go. But yeah, that was that was in honor of the 50th anniversary, and they because I think that was the only other time I think that was ever shown was one of those Kirby collector magazines, right? They had photocopies of some of it. Yeah,
they would tease little bits of it, and you'd just be sitting there going, "I need to read this."
Mm-hmm.
You know, I need to see this.
It's so cool.
He also there was in one of the issues of Jack Kirby Collector that I own, they showed he pitched a Planet of the Apes cartoon series to Ruby Spears because he was a fan. He was a fan.
Oh wow!
And, it was neat to see him draw the Planet of the Apes characters. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And,
well, that's what's cool. That's the fun of the Prisoner thing. Is it's like, I don't really even. I mean, it's cool to see it. He's basically redoing the opening episode. The opening credits a bit and then the opening episode. But it's just to see. Again, it's McGowan, but it doesn't. It looks like Kirby's version of McGowan. It's kind of like. It's like. What's his name? Crap. Not S. Raymond, but oh my God, it's on the tip of my tongue. He did the Empire Strikes Back Marvel adaptation. He did the Flash Gordon one. He drew the Flash Gordon comic.
Oh my God.
And his name
Al
is
Williamson.
On the tip of my Al Williamson. So you look at Al Williamson's movie adaptation of Flash Gordon or like Empire Strikes Back. That's Harrison Ford. First of all, he never did Sam Jones' image, and he kind of kept it looking like his Flash Gordon that he had drawn for a couple years before this.
I found that he was kind of marrying the two, which I kind of liked. Yeah.
Yes, I did too. Because he gets everybody else, Von Sydow and Timothy Dalton, like he kind of nails it. But you look at the Empire, it's like it's Harrison Ford, but it's like Williamson's version of Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
He's still doing his stuff, and that's what Kirby stuff is to me. It's still, if you know who it is, but he's putting his spin on it.
Yeah, of course, because it has to be brought into his world, and that's why it's beautiful.
Right. So what I did this year, because I was getting more into Kirby, and I knew that Comic-Con was coming up, and the Prisoner thing I wanted to get and everything, I picked up the Jack Kirby's Fourth World Omnibus, Volume 1.
Okay.
That hardcover, and there's 4 or 5 volumes, but this thing basically starts with, the issue of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen or whatever, goes and buys a prophylactic or whatever. What is it?
One, please.
Superman. Can I get one, please? Superman's ex-pal, the new Jimmy Olsen. That's what the name of that book is. So the first time that they sort of get into this world, and it's just gorgeous to read this stuff, but it's strange. What's funny is looking at some of these panels, you can see it as an animated.
Oh yeah.
You can see it as a trippy late '60s animated film.
Yeah.
It's really, really trippy stuff.
Well,
everybody just looks. Even the kids look like weird grown-ups. Very strange. And he's got.
Okay, I will.
And he's got some weird panels that are black and white photos and shit.
Yeah, they were doing that at the time. Yeah, I remember that. And
so this goes into the first New Gods, and then it kind of takes you through those first issues, and the Superman's in here, and Mr. Miracle, and all that stuff, and it's pretty fun. I mean, I don't know if I've ever. Did you read this stuff when it came out? The Fourth World stuff? Did you read all this stuff?
I read Commandees. I remember Commandy because there was an abundance of Commandees in 3-packs at discount stores, and it's post-apocalyptic. It was almost Planet of the Apes, and I think it was meant as almost Planet of the Apes, and I was keen to read that, and then but I mostly picked up his Marvel stuff, like Machine Man and the Eternals and Devil Dinosaur. I read those quite a bit, actually. not always following what was going on, but they were exciting to look at. And that was the one thing that, he rarely let you down with, was how good it looked. And, of course, Captain America and Falcon, which I adore. And
I love that comic. My brother Jack read it, and he'd hand it down to me, and that's why when they finally got into a movie together, it was like,
so
oh my God, finally seeing them in a movie, it's so awesome. What I love about that too, the Winter Soldier, is that they got Redford in the movie, because if they had been able to make a Captain America movie in like the mid '70s, Redford would have been the guy. They would have cast Redford. The other thing I love about Kirby, and I think you'll appreciate this, is when he writes like hip dialogue that young people say, or sort of
nobody's very good
like he put this group together called the Super Kids of the Century, the Forever People.
Yeah.
And like one of them is like got a furry vest on, and the other one's wearing a scarf, and they're all kind of very now and happening. And there's dialogue like, "I hear you right, thinkers. You're shouting anti-life, the positive belief. Listen as the great organ catches your words and finds the wonderful music in them." Like just this trippy, like he's trying to latch on to the sort of the new age kind of the utopia kind of thing. And it reminds all of that stuff that anybody does. All of it reminds me of, what's the Star Trek episode about Eden? Yeah. Going to Eden. We're going to Eden.
Herbert.
The way to Eden. Are you one? I'm one. Are you one?
Is it wrong that's probably the one I watched the most?
In fact, it makes perfect sense. That's the one that you watch the most.
And
that would
are like
be
my two favorite Star Treks.
And if somebody tied me up, put a gun to my head, and said, "Tell me Brian's their two favorite Star Treks," I would instinctively say probably Spock's brain and the one about the hippies. I promise you, those are Brian's favorite episodes. Yeah. So whenever I see an episode of Dragnet or the way Kirby writes in the stuff or whatever, I think about that episode and how we say how that stuff was dated before it even aired. As they're editing it, somebody went, "This is already old hat, man. They've moved on from this."
Watching a Dragnet, and Joe Friday's trying to get black guys to join the Force, and I think he says something like, "The Force needs more good Negroes like you, Jim." And it's like, am I asleep right now? Did he just say that? It's so square, it's hip, and
I love that stuff when it's just they're trying to do a special episode that sort of connects with the youth market or whatever,
terrible.
And they have no idea how people talk. They have no clue. Well, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in the other one does it too. What's his name? Denny O'Neil at DC. Denny O'Neil? Is that the guy I'm thinking of? He does a lot of that stuff too, where it's like, "Oh, let me tell you something, Mr. Big Shot with the bow and arrow.
Yeah.
You think you know what's down, what's happening." There's a lot of that.
To be honest, to be fair to Kirby, he wasn't the only person who couldn't write.
No.
There's the guy who was writing, and I can't remember his name, but I'm sure everyone yelling it. The Teen Titans comics of the late '60s, apparently. The name is on the tip of my tongue, but this guy had never met a teenager, ever. John Hughes famously went to malls and just sat there with a note like a creep and listened to kids talk. And that's why his movies resonated with us. That didn't happen with this guy who wrote Teen Titans, The worst example of that hep talk is the '60s. Archie got back into writing superheroes, and they hired Jerry Siegel, and he was brought in, and he called himself Jerry S, alongside of Stan Lee, and they said I think they told him make the comics like the way Marvel's doing them, and I can't tell if Siegel had completely lost his marbles or if he was just taking a piss, because those comics are bizarre. They're I honestly think I would believe them to be parodies of Marvel, as opposed to actually like, a sincere attempt. Because if they're parodies of Marvel, they're brilliant. But if they're sincere attempts, it's like, wow, you know, like he was losing his mind, you know.
It's like even in like I've got a Captain America and Falcon comic right here, which is one of the batch that I bought, you know, a couple months ago, and this is Kirby. This is the Falcon. It seems too far out to consider, yet when seen from the air, one can only conclude that this thing is a king size. And then he says, I think I've stumbled into Nick Fury's favorite nightmare file, 116. Falcon, you've been hung on the horns of a dilemma.
Yeah.
You know, shit like that, like this white guy writing jive, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You won't shake me, mister. I'm going to stick to your tail until I can get a good look at you. The game's over, cutie pie. I'm making my play. Jumping, catfish. I can't change course. That kind of shit. It's all over the Marvel stuff of the early 70s. And Kirby's really, he's not the only one by any means. No. But I just adore it. I adore that stuff. I could read that stuff for days.
Well, it's
you know, Cap is as earnest as ever, but Falcon is there, just kind of laying it on him.
Well, I think
you know?
I think
it's like in the book and record. What's the book and records? Power Record.
That one, the Captain Falcon one,
which is brutal, by the way. That one and the one with Man Wolf with Spider-Man. The endings are the most downbeat.
Yeah, well, I don't know
sad
if you know
endings
this,
of any child's record ever.
Power Records Man Thing opens with a clown killing himself.
Yes. I mean, with no one, like, did they just think kids could take it back then? Like, they're fine. They're going to be fine. We're in the middle of they're seeing shit on Watergate and Vietnam right now. They'll be fine. They can handle a clown taking his own life.
Bulletproof now. The president just quit.
They can handle that. They love it. Yeah, it's there's something there's something in that. I can't remember the line now, but there's something in that Cap and Falcon Power Records where, you know, Captain America, of course, and I love the voices.
Oh, they're amazing.
I love the voice work on those things. And some of the ones, like the Star Trek ones, some of those are really wonderful. Like the guy doing Kirk and they're pretty damn good.
Yeah,
it's not like they cast.
Really
They couldn't have cast this huge net all over New York or wherever it was to say, we're doing auditions for the next 2 weeks. Let's see if we can nail down a Kirk for this record. We're going to get paid $25 for this, and that's it. Considering all that, they got some great voices on those records. And when you listen to that Captain Falcon, it's like Captain America is sort of like this, and I don't know. It's been too long, Sam. But tell me again, and maybe it'll be fine.
Did you know?
And then Falcon is just like as hip as can be. Like everything he says to Cap is like, "What's your problem, man? Don't be jiving me." You know, the whole story.
Falcon will be voiced by Myron Flassberg.
Exactly.
The Cap and Falcon one has been sampled in several rap albums.
The Power Records one?
Maybe I should use the word hip hop so I don't sound like. It's been sampled quite a bit actually. I was just watching something the other night. A YouTube television.
Is that new rap?
That newfangled rap music the kids are into. You know,
is that part of the new wave?
I always wondered what, like, my kid, because I loved rap and I love punk obviously, and I was into death metal and all, speed metal and thrash and all that. So I was always wondering, like, what is my kid gonna get into? Because I'm kind of like this musical omnivore, you know, like, and I was wondering what my kid was gonna rebel musically. You know what my kid's into is like the Ink Spots. Yeah,
wow.
He
That's
went
fantastic.
like there, and it's sort of like, oh, okay, you know, but like,
I would have thought, since you turned them on to so much stuff, and what I love about what you do with them is it's like you give them a tray of sort of, appetizers and go, here's a bunch of stuff. I think it's cool. You don't have to like it. If you like it, great. And they latch onto
what they like
by being sort of turned on to it. And they find out what. And I've never really asked you, but I'm assuming you do that with music sometimes too, where you're like, this is the stuff I'm into, and like see who, and so nothing like the Ramones or Sig Sputnik or any of the other stuff you're into. They haven't like sort of jumped on.
No, like I don't.
I know you so well.
I listen to I like it goes all over the place. I will put the Sex Pistols on, then Neil Diamond, then the Butthole Surfers, then Lawrence Welk. I own Lawrence Welk records. It just whatever mood I'm in, and it goes all over the place. The only thing I can say is my daughter hates Mazzy Star. She hates when I play it. She just calls it sad, kill yourself music, and that's the only one. That's the only one that really gets on her nerves. Is that one, which I love, Mazzy Star. So,
well, you'll appreciate this. I was at a recording session yesterday. My friend Malcolm is in town. Last year they were here. No, about a year and a half ago. Didn't I tell you that I did hand claps on a track? Tony Visconti produced these two records. Daphne Guinness, she's doing an in-store at Amoeba that I helped set up for next week, and so when they were here like a year and a half ago, I was in the session and I did hand claps for the tune, and so I've got a credit in the liner notes. Hand claps L.A. Jason Lindsay, hand claps London Matt Berry. We're on the same track. So he and I are on the same track, and we're in the liner notes, which I couldn't be more excited about. But yesterday they had a session at a studio here, and Clem Burke of Blondie was on drums, and Roger Joseph Manning of Jellyfish was on keyboards.
You're a big fan of Jellyfish.
So huge Jellyfish fan. That was a big highlight for me of the month, basically. And then the gig on the 5th, but just meeting Clem Burke and sort of hanging out for a bit was pretty damn cool. That's like, really cool. Holy crap!
Wow.
But the Prisoner thing is you definitely have to pick that up, because that was like the big Kirby.
That is definitely what I'm going to pick up if I see it at Fan Expo this weekend, and that's on my sites. I also would very much like to get the 2001 Treasury Edition. Now, I don't know if I'll get that at Fan Expo because it's not exactly a friend prices venue. The rent's really high there, and I know every year I go and look at the $500 loose Shogun Warriors and go, I don't think I'll buy anything, But I picked up one of these from Entertainment Earth, which is the Super 7 Lords of Light Kirby figure.
Oh yeah, I picked that up too.
The card was like, I don't just buy a lot of new toys, and I had to have that. I mean, it's just so epic and cool, and I really wish, I really wish there was more stuff like this that embraced the creator. Like, this is exactly like I would love to buy a Thing and a Mr. Fantastic and anyone he made that was done like he drew them. Like, let's do that. Mm-hmm. That's childhood to me, and I want that, and I would give you the money out of my wallet for it. So
there is, I will say this: there were a few, I don't know if it was under New Gods or Fourth World figures that DC Direct did about 10, 12 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, they did. They even did a Command, which I don't believe I bought, and I should have.
And they did a Superman that is completely a Kirby sculpt. I think they did a Mr. Miracle. Yeah, there's a Superman that came out of that line.
Offended or famously bothered by his Superman. Have you ever heard that story that they would redraw his head?
Well, that's the thing. Is I was going to mention that because you look in this book, Superman is in this book, and you're like, the one face that stands out in this that looks nothing like Kirby is the Superman, and I'm like, how much did they mess with it? It looks like Kirby doing the body.
They would just bring in Kurt. I think they brought in Kurt Swan to do the head.
Kurt Swan, that makes total sense. Well, they in this line that they did, I don't know what book that he actually appeared like this, but I've got it in my case. It's definitely a Kirby sculpt, and they They did 2 or 3 other characters, like Mr. Miracle, and I think they did a Dark Side maybe as well. Also, in issue number 139 of Superman, Kirby's Fourth World of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. Are you ready for defoliants in your succotash? Are you ready for landlines in your lunchbox? Are you ready for this? 2 Rickles. Don and his long-lost alter ego, Goody.
I was hoping you would bring this up.
It could only happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could only happen.
Yeah, and also, like, you know, they finally put their finger on the pulse of what the young people were into, and it was Don Rickles.
They went right to Don. Yeah. Right to Don. They said, no, Harold Lloyd's out this month. Let's go to
CPO
Don.
Sharky.
Let's go to Don Rickles.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty fantastic. 2 Rickles.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that ludicrous cover of them holding his picture, and it's
with the picture, the portrait. Yeah,
like
if you look at it, there's something about it's to me that besides the bulk of the characters, the bodies, the poses, etc. It's the way it's where he places the eyes on their head. They are on opposite sides of their head, like they're almost at their ears. They're so far apart, and it works. It's like incredible art, but it's Kirby and only Kirby.
I mean, I'm such a fan of his expressions and his his dynamic flow, the way things go, the way things are exaggerated. I mean, I'm not saying anything that people haven't heard before or read, but it's just my personal. That to me has always been comics, and no one's ever really like. I know Bruce Timm is a big fan and has done his own take on it, but I don't think we're ever going to get another Jack Kirby. I don't think that's ever going to happen.
No,
I don't think we're ever going to get another Steve Ditko either. Just they were their own thing, and I think that was a once in a lifetime, and I'm happy that he was part of my childhood very much, actually. And
well, I think that anybody that would even the second you try to even attempt to emulate in any way, you're just going to look like you're copying Kirby. Like it's so distinctive. There's no way to sort of distill it. If you think about music, you've got hybrids that go on. To me, everything sort of branches off from the hybrid that the Beatles sort of created, from everything that they were influenced by, that became a pop music thing, or that changed, or the mod thing that became punk and whatever. But like Kirby stuff is like there's no. It just is what it is. There's no. I don't know anybody that sort of comes close to the way he drew. He also did things with faces that were kind of disturbing. Those cover shots where, like, let's say a mob is like tying someone up and carrying them through the streets, or there's some kind of riot going on or something. The way he drew people yelling, or being angry with that sort of lopsided face and one eye open and the other eye kind of squinting and massive teeth. Like he drew. That's
one of the reasons
teeth.
I don't like his superpowers. Is I hate the way he draws the Joker. The Joker doesn't even look kind of human. It's too exaggerated, and I don't know. That's just my opinion. Like, if
do you have the Kirby book?
No, I don't. The books I own are I own the first 10 issues of Fantastic Four in a hardcover. I own the first 10 issues of Commandy in a hardcover. Then I own, various Kirby stories in different publications. But I don't own a Jack Kirby book at all, actually, which is surprising.
Yeah, and for a second there, I thought I did, and now I suddenly can't find it.
Oh.
I swear I have the Kirby book. I thought I did. Well, I did. I think I do. It's somewhere. But, there's some great stuff in there, and Alex did sort of a tribute where he kind of aped a piece that Kirby did.
they did it in his style, sort of.
I love him.
Yeah, king, that's why he's the king.
Yeah, that's definitely why he's the king. And yeah, I think I'm gonna buy myself a Kirby comic this weekend. And it was his 101st birthday yesterday. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. No, this is a good call.
Yeah, I thought this was a lot of fun.
Well chosen.
And so,
yeah.
To you out there in listener land, tell us your favorite Kirby art. Tell us your favorite Kirby work.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention just before we go, he not only did he touch The Prisoner, which I love, but he also did the Black Hole comic strip for Disney.
Oh, I don't think I ever knew that.
It's really cool looking too. Like, I like his take.
You mean like a newspaper strip? A newspaper strip? Has that ever been released?
I don't think it's ever been collected, but it's out there. It's I love it. I love his art in that, and of course, he's the perfect artist to do that story. He lends his own. I'm more curious to read 2001 because it's not a very action-packed thing. I know he was a fan of it. He was a science fiction fan. He really wanted to do it. But I'm more curious to see how he makes that interesting. Because I know he does. Well,
he clearly was... I don't know enough about him to really comment on this, but if you didn't know better, like, as sort of happens with a lot of products, that you assume people making it might be a certain way or imbibe. Things. Like when you look at Ditko's stuff and Kirby's, and even Steranko, but although Steranko might have dabbled in things, I don't know. But they don't strike me as men that were like dropping a tab before they sat down and tried to make. But there you can understand why so much of that stuff appeals
to drug culture,
to kids on college campuses and the drug culture, because it was a trip. And he really saw things with a different eye, the way he sort of created these environments.
A friend of mine who's since passed away told me that in the 60s, when you went to see 2001, the floor was just full of people tripping on acid. They would pop acid before that ending to watch that ending. High as a kite, and it's just that's an interesting thing. So people were looking for that sort of, like a lot of people assume that Steve Ditko was for Doctor Strange. He was clearly, just popping acid, and of course, I couldn't have been further from the truth. The guy was a pretty straight edge dude, and I think the same with Kirby. These were just the thoughts pouring out of his head. I don't think he was. I've never heard any stories of him being, into counterculture like that.
What's funny about that 2001 thing at the end of the movie, 11 years later, those same people apparently grabbed acid that they had left over and tried having the same experience at Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
They all just went to bed?
Getting through that. They all just went to sleep, trying to get through that cloud for 45 minutes. trying to reach Regis. They fell asleep in the theater. The drugs didn't work anymore. In 79. It didn't work.
Oh.
Because that's what they were trying to do. I mean, that's kind of what Roddenberry or whoever it was thought, we can do this thing and bring it back, and it's going to be, so let's do like a 2001 sort of thing too. We're not popcorn like Star Wars. Let's be the serious science fiction thing we can be, and we're going to give them a 2001 experience.
Yeah. How'd that work out?
No, didn't happen. Yeah, it didn't quite happen. But we got to see Decker in his tight. That was worth the price of admission.
On that note. Yeah, I don't know who pointed that out to me, but I hate you because I can't watch that movie anymore, especially with today's more high definition televisions. That movie's ruined. All right.
That was Bowie giving his 2 cents.
He's
very upset we were talking about Decker.
He's a big fan of Stephen Collins, is he?
Big fan of Stephen Collins. Don't talk about him now.
He hasn't Googled in a while, has he?
All right, that was great. On that note, Chloe's freaking out, so...
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Make yours Marvel or DC, and we will be back resoundingly quick with a new show.
Thank you, guys.